Thank you, guys. So tonight, we're going to talk about designing all the things. I couldn't think of a better title because today we're in a state where, this is a little bit about me, but we used to design websites. Sorry, I'll go back real quickly. Principal designer at Twitter, some other stuff. The interesting thing is that in most of my career, what I've ended up finding is that design is a lot bigger than I think we usually think that it is. It involves a lot more than we tend to, or others even prescribe to it. And as we've moved into, I would say post 2007, which is the advent of the iPhone, things seriously changed for us. We used to design websites, and then we designed web apps. And now we're in the situation where we're designing these experiences that transcend platform. They are done on a myriad of devices, especially from Twitter, which had its roots in SMS, all the way up to the iPhone, the iPad, Android, Nokia phones. I mean, like the diversity of what we design for these days is pretty staggering. And I get asked quite a bit, like, it's kind of no big deal, except that it is a really huge deal, because this is how I feel most of the time. And I missed that one, so you guys can, I failed on that slide dramatically. But honestly, this is what designing today feels like in a lot of cases. You're battling this multi-headed monster, which is mobile and web and tablet and all these things. And there's got to be a way for us to get a hold of this, kind of bring it in a little bit and have a way to systematically approach the design that we do, so we can create an experience that no matter who you are and no matter what you access our service on, you get an experience that's not only delightful, but it's meaningful and it leaves you wanting to come back for more. So there's some things that we've discovered in our process at Twitter, and these are kind of like the overarching points I'm going to talk through this evening. We're going to start mobile first. Identify constraints. Think about flows and patterns. Sketching, prototyping, and building component systems. But this is the one that's really kind of crucial for everybody. I know everyone in this room, I'm assuming, has heard that the mobile first mantra. Luke W's been banging that drum for about 3 years. And I'm going to go through a series of slides really quickly to kind of illustrate to you why this is important. Over 371,000 children are born every day. 1.27 million iOS and Android devices are either bought or activated every day. 3.4 devices per child. I don't know about you guys, but in my house, that's actually not too far off. Half of the adults in America today own a smartphone. This is the first point in history where smartphones have actually are the dominant device versus like a traditional just basic mobile phone. This is a little Facebook stat. 2.5 years ago, 13% of their traffic came from mobile. Fast forward now, 50% of their stuff is coming through mobile devices. The really interesting bit here is that the mobile web, for Facebook's mobile web, outpaces all of their other, system level feature, or what do you want to call it? iOS, Android, all the native clients. At least, I don't know, I see a couple Facebook designers. Maybe that's, you can tell me whether this is true or not, but if not, we'll talk to TechCrunch and we'll call them out on that. But anyways, the bigger point is that just a massive amount of people are using mobile to access this stuff. Over 60% of Twitter's traffic and their active user base hits Twitter on a mobile device. 70% of Pandora's traffic comes from mobile. This is an interesting one. 60% of Google's mobile search comes from Apple and from iOS devices. And if you need a translation, that means that iOS is making Google a lot of money. eBay accounted for 50% of all mobile e-commerce kind of in the United States, and 70% of that came from the iPhone. That's a shit ton of revenue coming from one platform. And the final little bit of data here is in 2011, smartphone sales finally surpassed PC sales. So if you had any doubt in your mind whatsoever what era we live in the era of mobile. And if you aren't thinking mobile first, you're as good as dead. Now, I know a lot of people have called Luke out on this whole mobile first thing and that like it's just a mantra and hey, we still build for the web. And I totally agree with that. We do still build for the web, and in fact, it powers most of what we do. The reality, though, is that if you aren't thinking mobile first and if you aren't designing from that context, it makes it really, really hard to be on the forefront and to be leading and to be thinking about a product that can be used by the, 5 point some odd billion people that are subscribed to mobile. But you guys probably are saying, hey, I already am thinking mobile first. So, hey, everything's coming up roses, we're ahead of the game, but, in reality, this is what you have to deal with. And this is usually how you feel. And if it's a little bit daunting, that's because it is. And one of my favorite Brewer quotes is, almost nothing worthwhile is easy. And in this era and, being in San Francisco and in the startup culture and in the situation where we are actively, daily building and designing things that millions and millions of people are using and hopefully bettering their lives or at least connecting them with what's meaningful to them. It isn't easy, but it's rewarding when we can actually come through for them. So this is my kind of advice for everyone. Build mobile first using the principles of responsive web design. But at the same time, make sure you're focusing on the iPhone or iOS in general. This as a whole is kind of a strategy that I think is extremely important because if you're taking the kind of responsive approach, you can actually design and build things that scale all the way from a very basic feature phone up to iOS, Android devices running their web browsers, which at this point, it's kind of the balance between native apps and web browsing is sitting at like a 48, 49, kind of like it keeps shifting in the last few months. But basically, tons of people are using native apps, still a ton of people using the web to access everything. And, you guys saw the stats around eBay and around Google and the revenue that is tied to and associated with mobile. And, to be totally candid and honest, I think that if I had to make a choice today what platform to start with, I would start with iOS simply because there's more exposure, the quality and the engagement of the people who use the products are higher, and you just see a higher return on your value. That said, I actually think that you can be thinking about Android, and hopefully, if you have the ability to do it, designing for all of it at once. So the next step is incredibly critical, and here we are. We have a number of things that are going to overlap, but identifying constraints is, to me, one of the most important things as a designer that you can do. This means everything from looking at business needs, looking at existing mental models of not only your product, but products that are in the same kind of family as yours. It could be use cases that exist in your product today, things that you literally can't change. There's some things at Twitter. We are not going to increase the character count. Ladies and gentlemen, you get 140 of them, and that's it. No, not true. 140. No one has 142, but good try. Seriously, though, so for Twitter, 140 characters was the constraint from the beginning. It was based in SMS. You get an extra 20 characters to pass along a username, and that was the beauty. It has remained one of our core constraints, and it informs a ton of what we do. We want it to be simple. We want people to be able to transmit things in real time to one another. What's amazing about it is that you can put a lot of pointers to a lot of really cool things in 140 characters. Those constraints are what allowed an entire amazing ecosystem and a huge community and a product to grow out of it. Another great example, Instagram's square photo. And to this day, I still applaud Kevin for making that decision. Because you know what? Landscape versus portrait, and we got to crop, or do we not crop? I mean, like, as designers, those are hard problems to deal with, like in a product. And he made it really easy by saying, you know what, it's going to be a square. And whether you like the square or not, he built a really compelling product by throwing filters on a square photo, straight up. Constraints, they work. Anyways, one other thing to really, really pay attention to is thinking in terms of flows and paths. And interestingly enough, I think, we come out of a lot of, site maps and information architecture and what is the structure and hierarchy of things. And it's a very ordered and linear way of thinking about things. But the last time I checked, most human beings are not linear and not ordered and not predictable. They move in flows. They interact with things at different moments, and based on different feedback, we'll have completely different responses. And so one of the things that we find is the more that we're able to articulate a story around why and around how someone will use a specific feature, or when you're looking at a brand new product, what am I solving, right? And if you can tell that story, you'll start to notice that certain things are going to emerge. You'll even start to see potentially the interface can emerge out of a story. And so this is critical, in my opinion, to building products that human beings want to use. They want to come back to, because they take one step, and the next step is actually, that's where I wanted to go. And then, there's a surprise, but actually the reward by clicking on that thing was so awesome that I'm going to do it again. Versus, I followed a very explicit structure, and now I'm at the end of this pattern, and I'm done. And you don't have there's not a lot of emotion that comes out of a very structured path like that. Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. I highly recommend this book. Even if you don't intend to be a cartoonist, or you have no interest in cartoons, this is one of the best books on sketching and storytelling. And to be totally honest, it's an amazing book on product design if you read it from that context. This point is something that we do a lot of, and we find that the more time we spend sketching, the more deeply thought through our product is, and the more we're able to identify things way before we get into Photoshop or even into production. Something I like to do, and you may already be doing this, and if you don't, I highly encourage it, is involve product managers, involve engineers. Put a pen in your CEO's hand and have them draw something. It doesn't matter how high fidelity it is, and in fact, the lower fidelity, the better. What you're trying to do is get ideas out of your brain and onto paper, onto something that someone else can draw on and someone else can write on, and you can point to, and you could stick it up on the wall, and people could put Post-its around it and be like, this is a really great idea. Actually, this part's horrible and it sucks. Please don't do this, right? These are the kind of things that drawing and sketching as a team and as a company allow you to do. Static design, in my opinion, is nothing more than a theory. And I've been encouraging our team as much as possible to try not to jump into Photoshop. The longer you can keep yourself out of Photoshop, the better, in my opinion. I don't have anything against Photoshop. I actually think it's a great tool. I find, though, that even in myself, if I jump in too soon, I put myself in this strange place where I'm actually artificially designing, and I'm actually theoretically answering some of the questions I'm asking myself, but I don't know. I have no idea whether or not this very static screen that I've designed will do anything that I expect it to do, which is why I personally think the most important thing you can do is to prototype it. Build things. I firmly believe that designers should code. What that means depends on the designer. It may be that you never ship production code. That's absolutely fine. Can you put some HTML and CSS together to indicate how something will behave? Please. If you don't know how to write, HTML and CSS, there's awesome tutorials online. There's tons of people that I'm sure that you know. Invest the time. I know a number of folks in the UX community that would never actually call themselves designers, and they're going to things like UX Bootcamp, and they spend like a couple days in a room learning how to write basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript so that they can create a very low fidelity prototype of the thing that they're working on. Because at the end of the day, what we do, we design behavior. We design for moments of interaction. We design for these things that are requiring and eliciting responses. We don't design things just to sit there and look pretty. Actually, sometimes we do. Some of what we do is absolutely to be beautiful and to communicate a message that you don't necessarily interact with. But as product designers, especially, your sandbox is interaction. Your sandbox is what happens when I click this or I tap on that. Does it even make sense? Should I pinch to zoom this, right? Oh, wait, I'm on a phone and pinching to zoom is difficult, right? But in my beautiful Photoshop mock-up, this is what it'll look like, right? I mean, am I mistaken here? So I don't know. I personally, I push really hard on this. I think that we as a team, we've been building out a prototyping environment. We've been getting more and more of our designers jumping right into writing code, building things together, and it allows us actually to talk about how someone will use this in a much greater fashion. Steve Jobs is famous for this quote, which is, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like, but it's how it works." And I fundamentally believe as designers, this is critical to how we create successful products. So putting this into practice, this is what we've done a couple of times at Twitter, and choose one core component. Now, I've had the fortune of doing this twice at scale, and this is kind of a process that I think you can apply to either something that exists already or something that you're creating brand new. So you design it across every platform that you support at that moment, in every single situation, state, context that it exists. And that probably sounds like a lot of work, and that's because it is a lot of work. But again, you remember the quote, anything good was rarely ever easy. This is Twitter's navigation system about 14 months ago. It looks somewhat consistent. I think a lot of people, at first blush would actually say it totally looks consistent. The problem is that different icons, different layouts, some text, some glyphs, all kinds of stuff. And with the redesign we did last year, one of the things we wanted to address was we want to make it crystal clear how you can access and navigate Twitter. And we went through a lot of exercises to define what this is. We had constraints from both business and from the product itself, what we were able to do technologically and things we were putting into Twitter. And we were able to create a navigation that has honestly resulted in a lot of people commenting on, like, you know what, if I use it on the web, if I use it on my phone, if I use it on a tablet, I know where to go. I know how to use this thing. I was very fortunate to get to work on the recent thing that we rolled out called In-Tweet Media. And it's essentially us giving you a preview of the thing that you're sharing already on Twitter. And in order to do this and have it work across all of the devices and all of the platforms that we support, I set about exploring the tweet itself. And I looked at the JSON that comes down and populates the tweet. I looked at every platform that we support, and I looked at the ways we were rendering these things. And we, fortunately, were able to create a component. Our tweet now is what I consider a responsive component, that the design expands and contracts based on what you put it in. Now, it's not exactly like write once and it works everywhere, but the design of the component, it's responsive, it works across the board, and we're pretty excited about that. You've got cross-platform, multi-device, responsive component. We've been exploring this in other pieces of the product, and we're starting to find that as we do this, the constraints are crystal clear to people. We're able to articulate how you put things together. And as we begin to build more and more stuff into Twitter, you can see exactly how things should be done. So pretty excited about this as a process. And it manages so much of that, like, oh, well, I'm designing for iOS, and I'm over here designing for the web. And you end up with two totally different products. But instead, you get a team who's concentrating on looking at, what is this experience across the board, and can we get it down? Can we identify the data? Can we Can we understand how people will interact with this thing and give them a consistent experience? We're not there. We're not all the way there, obviously, but we're working very hard at making it so that wherever you are, you can experience it in a way that is completely understandable and translatable across platforms and devices. This is one, I'll just kind of wrap up with this. Practical tip, print stuff out. Honest to God, it's one of the best things that you can do with your team. It's really interesting. We work in a digital environment, and the screen is this kind of misleading, it's not misleading, but it leads you into a false sense of security. And there's something really interesting about when you print out a design, it translated it into a physical object. And you can put that physical object, even though it's just a piece of paper, onto a desk with about 20 other physical objects, and you look at this thing across the board and you're able to draw on it and people can point to it and like you engage your physical body in it. You can hang it up on a wall and people can walk by and be like, why are we doing this? And you will have a conversation about the design decision you made to do that thing. For us at Twitter on our team, we print stuff like crazy. We also recycle. So that's just a caveat there. But honestly, this is just a little tip that we found that like there's nothing better for being able to really dissect and analyze and talk about the work that you're doing. So again, mobile first, identifying your constraints, thinking in flows and paths, sketching as much as humanly possible, and then building as quickly as you can. And then my hope is that you'll walk away with a set of responsive components that allows your team to move way faster and have a consistent experience across the board. Thank you very much.